Hi everyone, good morning and welcome to week 4 of your journey into the world of the unseen. Now I told you that these courses roll along pretty swiftly, so we're at the halfway point already. This is week 4. So this week we're focusing our attention on eukaryotic microorganisms, eukaryotic pathogens. Remember that eukaryotes have a true nucleus. So we're talking about things like amoeba and paramecia. Those are eukaryotic unicellular organisms. And we're talking about viruses this week as well. So this is the middle of the term, and with that comes the midterm exam. Now, I provided links, and more on that in a minute, but I provided links to 2 videos to help you understand the concepts here in week 4. Now, the first is a video describing fungi and protozoans. And in the second, Professor Dave describes viruses and how viruses like SARS-CoV-2, that's the virus that is responsible for the COVID-19 pandemic, are able to get into cells and then hijack cellular mechanisms to make you sick. So this week we'll touch on 2 topics. Chapter 12 is eukaryotic microorganisms. Now, when people think about microbiology and microorganisms, they generally picture in their mind bacteria. However, there are a host of other microorganisms that are eukaryotic. Remember, eukaryotes have a true nucleus, and though they are generally much larger than their prokaryotic counterparts, prokaryotes, those are your bacteria and your archaea, they can still be just as pathogenic and just as dangerous, and sometimes even more so than bacteria. So, organisms like fungi and protozoans, including amoeba, and even multicellular organisms like tapeworms, are included in this category. Now, I know that pinworms, tapeworms, these are multicellular eukaryotic organisms, and some of them are even large enough to be seen with the unaided eye. However, for some strange reason in the past, uh, they've been grouped into the study of eukaryotic pathogenic organisms in microbiology. So you'll learn about tapeworms and pinworms and roundworms, um, like that. I also think of flukes and um, leeches and those sorts of things as well. But anyway, so you will learn about those things, the eukaryotic microorganisms, and also in chapter 13 you'll learn about viruses, virions, and prions, or prions. Some people pronounce it prions. Either way is fine. It's a misnomer to call viruses and prions organisms. Now, they are organic, but they consist of just protein and genetic material. They do not do things like bacteria. So they don't ingest and they don't reproduce on their own and they don't excrete waste products. Okay, so in that sense they're not living, but they are organic. Very important distinction there. So again, for viruses, for example, SARS-CoV-2, they're tiny packets of nucleic acid and protein. Nucleic acid, that's DNA or RNA, and protein. Viral genomes may be DNA, that would include like hepatitis B, herpes, and parvovirus, or RNA, like the flu virus, rabies, HIV. And these tiny genomes, the Ebola virus, for example, has only 7 genes, very small. The genomes are very tiny, and they're wrapped in a tiny capsule of protein. Now, viruses are extremely fragile outside of a host cell, and they can really do nothing on their own. They have to get into the body, into the cell, and then their proteins essentially, I use this term very loosely, but hijack the host cell's machinery to then reproduce themselves. Okay, and again, I use that phraseology very lightly because they don't, the viruses themselves, they don't have a goal. Like a bacterium has a goal, propagate the species, but a virus does not have that kind of instinctive capacity. So they're extremely fragile outside of the cell. They must invade host cells where they again essentially hijacked the host cells replication, transcription, translation mechanisms to disseminate themselves. They're too small to be even seen with a standard light microscope or compound microscope, which we use to view bacteria. And they can only be seen with the extremely and very powerful electron microscope. Okay, housekeeping items for the week. Make your discussion post early in the week so that you can fully engage in discussion. Yes, you still get credit for making your initial post no later than 11 p.m. Friday evening. However, you cannot fully engage with your colleagues, with your peers, with your classmates if you wait until the last minute to do your post. They don't have time to respond. They don't really have ample time to respond to you in a substantive way, and nor do you really have time to get back to them. So the conversation, I mean, you can make some comments for sure, or other people can make some comments on your post for sure. However, there is not enough time for there to be any real substantive discussion. That's why I say, and I've um, um, noted for many of you, make your initial post earlier in the week so you can fully engage in discussion, and that's what that means. Okay, but anyway, the deadline is Friday. That's going to be July 18 this week, 11:59 p.m. DCU time. There's a microbial diversity and microbial assignment homework and microbial diversity quiz this week, and both of those are due no later than Sunday. That's July 20, 11:59 p.m. GCU time. Now, the midterm exam is this week. The midterm exam covers everything from weeks 1, 2, and 3, or topics 1, 2, and 3. It's open right now. It opened this morning. It closes Sunday, July 20, 11:59 p.m. There are absolutely no extensions on exams, so you must do the exam this week and get it completed and submitted no later than Sunday evening. The exam covers topics from weeks 1 through 4. I said weeks 1 through 3, but it includes this week as well. It's worth 150 points. I have already posted a midterm topics review in class resources. It's just essentially a list of topics that I think you should be familiar with going into the midterm exam. These are things that you've already been exposed to, and it's just like I give you a topic, and you can go back in your notes and review those things. I've thrown in a couple of little reminders, bits of information that should trigger your memory along the way. But essentially, it's just a list of topics. Now, again, it's in class resources, and I have a note here that says, remember to check class resources as I add helpful documents and links there often. With that said, I'm still reminding some of you to follow APA guidelines, 7th edition, when formatting your references and your citations. Also, I am still reminding some of you that your initial post and your peer responses need to be at least 150 words in length. It must be substantive. I'll explain that in a minute again. And they must include at least one authoritative reference properly cited. What is substantive or substantive post? What is a substantive or substantive post? Okay, you can get on there and you can write 150 words saying, "Hey Joe, I Really enjoyed reading your post. I agree with everything that you said. You pointed this and this and this out, and you um, helped to remind me of this and this and this. Well done. Keep up the good work. For 150 words, that is not substantive. Substantive or substantive is you read Joe's post, you you see something in there in Joe's post triggers your interest. You go and do your own research. You find something to expand on or expound on. I should say, expand Joe's post or expound on some thought that Joe put into his post. For 150 words, include a reference. That's substantive. So, first of all, if you do not do 150 words, and by the way, 150 words do not include, the niceties, right? If you start your post out, and many of you see that I do. By the way, my posts don't count. My responses to you do not have to be substantive. Just remember that as the instructor, but yours have to be. But I will put in there, hey, hey, Betty, I really enjoyed reading your post this week, or I really enjoyed reading your thoughts on the discussion topic this week. It's okay to start your post out that way. Um, you can say nice things to your peers. That's a good way to start off your response. There's nothing wrong with that, and I encourage you to do that. It just makes for a more friendly and inviting and discussion environment. However, the substantive part of your post must be meat, right? You have to have something that pertains to what your peer has been talking about in their post, or something that we are discussing that week as far as information from your textbook or whatever. But you have to have some meat there, right? You have to extend the discussion or expound on a point made by your peer. That's substantive. Okay, that's the first thing. And then the second thing is you must um, include at least, my guideline is, and by the way, some of you I don't think still have read my guidelines. They're in class resources. I did a whole document telling you these are the things you need to do to do a proper post. And I gave you examples of a bad post, of a good post. I even did one of my posts on there. So you can have the idea, get the idea. So, but with regard to references, the idea with references, okay, you cannot just put 150 words or 200 words or however many words down and then tag on at the end Anderson et al., your textbook, okay? That's not how academic writing works. Academic writing is where okay, say your topic is Ebola virus disease. So um, um, you read a research paper on Ebola virus disease, and there's a piece of information in there that you want to share with your peers. So you glean from that, you paraphrase it, put in your own words, and then you do a parenthetical citation. That means that at the end you put your citation in references. You're citing your in parentheses. You're citing your reference that you have listed below. You're citing it, and you're putting it in parentheses. And then you go to your textbook and you read something to add to that, and you paraphrase that, you glean from that, paraphrase it, and then you put Anderson et al. 2024 or 2022, whichever version you're reading from. And then you list Anderson down at the bottom. Okay, that's how you do academic writing. You don't just put a bunch of stuff there, and it may be good stuff, and then say, okay, Jeffrey says I need a reference, I'll pop on Anderson et al. Or I'll pop on CDC 2025, right? That's not how it works. You actually, the information that you put in your post actually has to come from the resource or come from the source that you are referencing. Okay, that's how it works. I read everything, and yes, um, I and many of the sources or references that you guys choose. I've been teaching these classes, this and lecture and lab, since 2022. So every once in a while, somebody comes across with a source, a piece of information, um, a take, uh, perspective on the topic that I hadn't even thought about, and they put in a new reference, and I'm like, hallelujah, and I'll put on there, great job, you did a wonderful job, and I'll look up and by the way, I look up all the references. So if your research article has to have an active link, I've told a number of you that as well. If I click on the link and it comes up to a blank page, or the page doesn't open, or it comes up to a manufacturer's website or something, then that's not a valid reference. And by the way, with regard to that, some of you are using um, like commercial websites, like from Thermo Scientific and Carolina Biological Supply. A commercial website is not an authoritative reference. I don't care what they put on there. I don't care what kind of information is on there. That is not considered in academia an authoritative reference unless you are talking specifically about an item from that manufacturer, like a thermocycler. If you're talking about a specific thermocycler, then you can reference the manufacturer's website about that. But if it's just information on PCR or pathogenic E. coli, whatever, you cannot use the manufacturer's or commercial website as your reference. Okay. Um, but anyway, so then I lost my train of thought. But my whole point is you must have an authoritative reference. You can't just tack on Anderson et al. At the end of your big long spiel, and your post or your response has to be substantive. You have to have some meat there. You have to build on what your colleague has presented or expound on that. Expand or expound. Okay, that's the deal. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about that. Oh, by the way, also, some of you still need to watch my little video on binomial nomenclature. When you write the um, names of bacteria or for whatever, any kind of organism, Homo sapien, whatever, um, you use the genus and species name. The genus name is capitalized, the species name is all lowercase, and everything is italicized. Or if you don't italicize it, you have to underline it. Okay, that's the way that works. Check out my little video in class resources on that. So that's all I have. Good luck on your midterm. Let me know what's going on. I will be transferring your grades from last week from Connect to Halo, so I'll be updating your grade books today. And that's all I have for you. So good luck on the exam. Let me know what's going on this week, and I will talk to you soon.